Are you connected to Jesus? Really plugged in? How can you tell? Jesus said, stick with me. Not me, with Jesus. Good morning and welcome to the 755 Live. For about 5 minutes, you'll hear all about an easy to remember soundbite version of what Jesus said. The point? To help you experience life to the fullest the Jesus way. Today's Jesus said comes from John chapter 15, verse 4. But we're going to read a little bit more in the chapter for context. So starting in verse 1 of John chapter 15, it says, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce good fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. In verse 4 he continues, he says, remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. So again, this is what Jesus said, saying, you've got to be in me if you want to produce fruit. You got to be near to me if you want to produce fruit. The first part was him talking about how God, he prunes the vine. He cuts away what's not there or producing. And then for those that are producing, he says that, he prunes them so that way they get even better. And going on in verse 5, he says, yes, I am the vine and you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Kind of just reiterating, saying we can't do anything without Jesus. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. Man, that's heavy. Reading number 6, it says, if you don't remain in me, he said, you're useless branches and you'll wither. And he said that such branches are gathered into a pile to be burned. And, that's just giving kind of an example of, what happens at the judgment. Those that aren't true followers of Christ are going to find themselves, in the bad place with 2 L's. So after this chapter, this is after what we call the Last Supper. Some of the last teaching of what Jesus gave us. He says, no fruit, no connection. So he's just trying to just set that into them that like, hey, you've got to be in me. If you're ever going to make it through this, if you're ever going to do what I've called you to be, if you're ever going to be the disciples that I know you can be, you've got to remain with me. Jesus clearly stated that he alone is the vine, the source for all of those who believe in him. We are attached to him by the vine, by faith, but also for a purpose. Anything that's on a vine is to produce fruit. And if we don't, he tells us that his Father, like a good gardener, is going to cut us off. If you have a branch, I've seen my mother garden a lot, and it's like anytime there was something that was just dying or something, she would prune it. She would cut it off. There was a branch that was dead, she'd cut it off and let it be done with. And he's saying that's what God will do to us. Bearing fruit isn't optional. It's a direct result of being in connection with Jesus. If we're not connected to him, we're not going to be producing anything. So for those of you that don't know, I used to be an electrician. And being an electrician, I got to see a lot of crazy things. But you see how power affects things. When things are connected to power, they work. I've seen things that were just one connection off and it didn't work. And we'd have this huge machine up and, you're like, no way this thing ever going to power up. And, we turn it on and it works. But it just goes to show you without power, without being connected all the way. And like I said, we would see it sometimes. If there was just one tiny connection off, the whole thing wouldn't work. And that's really what it's like with Jesus. If we're not truly connected to him, all things connected to him, then it's not going to work the whole way. We have to be plugged into him. But then at the same time, we can't be plugged into him and not think we're going to change. We can't expect ourselves not to change. We can't say, oh, this is just me. This is the way I'm going to be. No, we should know that when we're plugged into Jesus, when we're truly plugged into that power of his life-changing grace and mercy and love, then we have to change. So when you produce much fruit, he says, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to the Father. So where's that fruit? What does that fruit look like? Jesus' very words, when we obey what he says, Jesus produces the fruit in our lives. Disciples make disciples. Disciples bear spiritual gifts. In Galatians 5, chapter 5, verse 22 through 23, it says, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These are the fruits of the Spirit. This is the kind of fruit a true disciple bears. And if you stick with Jesus, you will stick with love, and you will be his true disciples. So again, Jesus said, stick with me. How can you put this into action today? How can you be more plugged into Jesus and experience that life-changing power that he's trying to give to you? So thank you so much for listening. If you would like, comment, and share. Remember to join us with the Bible plan at bible.today.church. And I really appreciate you. I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope this time together has helped you live life to the fullest, the Jesus way. We end everything by saying, remember to follow Jesus today and love first.